Hey guys, it's Thefrxion here, or Tank12, whoever you want to call me, I don't really care. And today we're going to continue on the test server spree that we're on right now, and we're going to be taking a look at the Emil II. Now, I'm just going to point that out from here on out pretty much. The Emil I and the Emil II are very, very similar tanks, or if you look at the Emil II and the Kranvagn, you can almost see no distinct difference with these tanks. It's very similar to the AMX 5120 and the AMX 50B. Both tanks look very similar, but there are some distinctive changes that you will feel when you're playing this tank. Now, if we take a look at this vehicle, the HD model, to the Kranvagn and compare it to the Kranvagn, you can see that Kranvagn is just a little bit bigger than the Emil II, and you know that the Kranvagn is already not a big tank. The Emil II, in that case, is even a little bit smaller. There's some distinctive differences on the tank models, and that is, as you can see right here, there is no metal part that is connected above the lower plate, and you have some camo nets on top, some nice detail in my opinion, but other than that, I think the characteristics are very similar to the Kranvagn, and we're gonna take a look and compare this vehicle to three other heavy tanks that are in a very similar category, in my opinion, because we're going to be taking a look at the Soviet ST-1, which is in its armor value very similar to the Emil II. Then we're going to be taking a look at the E-75, which is in the armor and gun handling way very similar to the ST-1 and the Emil II. These are two very, very much liked or well-liked tier 9 heavy tanks, especially because of their armor. And then we're going to be taking a look at the Emil II and the other tier 9 auto-loading heavy tank, the AMX 5120. And the first thing we'll be looking at is the firepower, as always. So pretty much almost all of them have the same caliber except for the ST-1, which has, except for the ST-1 and the E75, because the E75 actually is rolling around with a 128mm gun, and the the ST1 has a gun, I think, of the caliber, we have to look, I think it's 122, yeah, 122 tier 10 gun, which is also on the IS-4 and then on the T10. This gun is a little bit different than the Emil II's 120mm Akan L40 auto-loading cannon. So obviously there are going to be slight differences in its firepower. So the main differences that you can see right here is just the alpha damage that the E75 has the most, or the highest alpha damage, because it's running a 128mm gun. It's 8mm more by caliber than the Emil and the MX 5120, and 6mm more than the ST1. Then the rate of fire, well, the rate of fire is not the best, 4.98 rounds per minute. Now we can compare that also to the Kranvagn, because, well, the Kranvagn is very similar to the Emil II, and you can see that the Kranvagn has a much better rate of fire. If we compare that also to the AMX 50B, I'm just going to put that tank right in there real fast, you can see it is even better. The Kranvagn has better not DPM, but rate of fire than the AMX 50B. Obviously, in that case, it has better DPM as well in the end. But that is one of the distinctive differences with this tank to the Kranvagn. It has a rate of fire which is a lot slower than on the Kranvagn. That is very similar to the AMX 5120 and the AMX 50B, as you can see right here, 5.45 rounds per minute and 6.55. That's 1 round per minute more, pretty much. So we're just gonna take these two out. Actually, we can keep the Kranvagn just to see what kind of differences it makes. Now, the traverse speed is also not as good. It's third place on that again, 20.86 degrees per second. Now that's 13 degrees per second better on the AMX 5120, but you do have to keep in mind that it does still have the 12 degrees of native gun depression. But it does not have the 10 degrees of gun elevation, only 8 degrees of gun elevation, just like the AMX 5120, and that is really difficult. But you can see the real big difference right here is that, well, the AMX 5120 only has a gun depression of -6 degrees, and that is pretty much the double. The Emil II has pretty much double of gun depression that the AMX 5120 has, and you'll notice that if you're driving around with the Emil II and the AMX 5120. So the load size, or pretty much the shell velocity, is also the reload time in between the shots is faster, 0.03 seconds faster. Capacity on a magazine is the same. And you can see that the reload time though is longer because you do not have the same rate of fire. 39.16, that's almost 40 seconds at a tier 9 heavy tank. But the main difference is that you on this tank have armor, where on the AMX 5120 you're almost pretty much a paper tank. That is the main difference we'll be looking at later on. The aim time is on the AMX 5120 still better than on the Emil II, with about 0.09 seconds faster aim time. Dispersion is also better, even better than the Kranvagn. But you can see the aim time on the Kranvagn and the reload in between shots actually gets better on the Kranvagn instead of the Emil II. Now, obviously, the ST1 and the E75 can't really compete in those cases because they don't have an auto-loading system, and you can see that their turret traverse is a lot less. At least on the E75, it's a lot slower, and the ST1 is actually in the middle area right there. Also, a very, very well armored turret. Well, average damage per minute obviously is not the highest. AMX 5120 actually wins that competition, and the Kranvagn is a lot better in that case. So that's for the firepower. The main difference though that I have to point out on the Emil II is that you're still going to be firing APCR rounds because you're running the same gun as the Kranvagn if you're fully upgraded. We're only talking about the fully upgraded tank right here in this video, so keep that in mind. The AMX 5120 and the E75 and the ST1 are only firing AP rounds as standard shells, and all the other rounds are heat except for the AMX 5120, I think. So then we get to the mobility part. Obviously the E75 and the ST1, very, very standard heavies. They sacrifice their mobility for their armor most of the time. I mean, 40 kilometers per hour is not bad, but you can see that with the 1000 horsepower engine that this AMX 5120 has, you can get up to 65 kilometers per hour. Now, if you look at the top speed of the Emil II with 56 kilometers per hour, that is 4 kilometers less than the Kranvagn. That tank is extremely fast as well, and you'll probably wonder because it's almost half the weight of the AMX 5120, and that has to do with the size difference. Now, if you take a look, I'm just gonna quit and go outside. This is the Emil II, and this is, oh, we have to go to the front because this is my favorite, is the AMX 5120. This tank is huge compared to the Emil II. The Emil II is like a little house. The AMX 5120 is an enormous building. So it's a real big tank. So that brings us to the point right here. Oh, actually we skipped the armor. We'll get to the armor afterwards. That brings us to the point that, well, you're quite fast with this tank. You do not have the same engine power, but still you don't weigh as much as the AMX 5120. The AMX 5120 is still the fastest tier 9 heavy tank. But that is where the big problem comes in. These two tanks are very well armored, and they're very heavy as well. So as you can see, 40 kilometers, you'll get around with these tanks, but you'll be very well protected as well. This tank, on the other hand, as we are going over to the armor statistics, the AMX 5120 has 50 HP more than the Emil II. That's 1750. That has to do because it's an auto-loading tank. You can shoot 4 rounds in a very rapid succession, while these two tanks can only fire every 12 or 10 or 11 seconds, regarding your skills and equipment that you're using. But as you can see right here, this tank has 100mm frontal armor, and this tank has 100mm frontal armor as well. The only difference right here is the angling part. This tank is a lot better angled, so the frontal part of the armor is not as weak as this tank, because this tank is really weirdly angled. Most of the time you will not bounce the frontal plate. And then you have the big weak spot, the turret. The turret has only 100mm frontal armor. Now if you look at the Emil II, it follows in the footsteps, or pretty much it's the predecessor of the Kranvagn, and the Kranvagn follows in the footsteps of the Emil II, and it has 215mm of armor with a very nicely angled frontal turret hull. As you can see right here, it's very much the same as the Kranvagn, so nothing is going to be able to penetrate your turret with 215mm and with the additional angling that you have on that armor. So people will be running against a wall pretty much when you're facing that tank. So although the E75 and the ST1 have better armor than the Emil II on the sides as well, and on the rear especially, since you can pretty much penetrate this tank with high explosive rounds very reliably on the rear, they do not have that kind of turret armor. While the E75 has a very strong turret with 252mm of frontal armor, but it's not as well angled. It's a very flat surface. The ST1, we do not have to talk about its turret. That is one of the best turrets in the game, if not the best turret in the game. And even the Emil II, I think, cannot really compare to the ST1, because the commander's hatch on this vehicle is even worse than on this tank. But that gives you a rough idea of the Emil II. Amazing turrets. Pretty much all the characteristics that are to the Kranvagn. This tank is going to be one of the best tier 9 heavy tanks out there. And if you look at the concealment factor also, it's very well concealed. But the view range as well is lacking. As again, the Kranvagn doesn't have the best view range. This tank does not have the best view range as well. So what does this leave to us? Well, there is new competition to the AMX 5120, and pretty much, in my opinion, if you're going for the Swedish line, there is no more need for you to go for the French heavy tank line, because the Swedish tank line just makes everything better that the French heavy tank line already excels at, and this tank, they just make it even better. So pretty much the French heavy tank line is almost useless once these bad boys come on the battlefield. 6 degrees, more gun depression, very good armor, almost no weak spots except for the lower plate right here. And other than that, a little bit less DPM, 50 HP less. But other than that, you're fast, you have all the other characteristics, you have gun depression, all you need for this vehicle. The only thing that you're lacking is gun elevation, a good reload time, but you can just get that all out by, you have so many strong points on this vehicle, so that all the negatives don't really make that much of a difference. So the Emil II is the perfect tank to prepare you for the Kranvagn, because it is pretty much the Kranvagn. And yeah, what else can we say about this tank? Statistics wise, it's just so damn good. It fires APCR rounds for premium shells, and for crying out loud, this tank is going to be amazing. And we're going to be taking a look at the gameplay of right now, and let's see what this vehicle can do if everybody lets you reload in time. So the game that we're going to take a look at is on the map Kharkov. And in here you can pretty much already see that this vehicle, first of all, plays and looks very similar to the Kranvagn, as already said. It has very similar characteristics, just some very distinctive differences, and that are the lower HP, the slower or the worse mobility that you have. You're not as fast as the Kranvagn, and the reload time, which is almost 19 seconds longer on this vehicle. I think on the Kranvagn you have something of about 26 seconds, while in that case it's 13 seconds longer on this vehicle. Other than that, it is pretty much very, very much the same as the Kranvagn. And that makes this vehicle, well, my eyes, with the new update for the penetration statistics that they added, it makes it really, really strong. And you can see right there, the T95 made one big mistake. He shot our turret. He should have shot our lower plate, because our turret is no weak spot. And right here you can see, yeah, spaced armor on the side, but still the second shot goes in. Very, very weird angle that we have there. Yeah, so now we're pretty much in a one-on-one engagement with this T95. Obviously, a T95, armor-wise, has some very distinctive weak spots, and you can see that he just tracked us right there. That shot might have gone through our hull, might have done damage, but as you can see right there, he actually was unable to do any damage to us. So right here you can see the reload time that we're talking about, which makes this vehicle pretty much very, very vulnerable in certain situations. If you're reloading 39 seconds, that gives the enemy tanks a lot of time to actually go around you and engage you. The one difference on this vehicle though is that the gun handling is not as good as on the Kranvagn. The Kranvagn is obviously a tier 10, so it needs to be better than this vehicle, but the gun handling on this vehicle is just not as great. And right here you can see we're going up against the OHO, and that is one very reliable way of dealing damage through the Swedish heavy tank line and tank destroyer line, and that is by shooting high explosive rounds at these vehicles. They do have a lot of frontal armor though, but you can still wear them down little by little, which is better than doing no damage and keep on shooting them with AP rounds. Right there you can see the gun handling on the Kranvagn a little bit better, a little bit unlucky right there. And we're going to engage that Emil I, the predecessor to this tank, and we catch him right off guard on the corner of the map. So pretty much right now we're up to 2635 damage, and we've blocked about 2000 HP worth of damage, and most of those shots obviously bouncing off the turret right there, as you can see. And right now we're going up against a tier 9 Swedish tank destroyer, the Thefrxion 103B, which does not have a heat grid, but I think the same gun, or a very similar gun to the tier 10 variant, and he bounced our turret as well. So you can just see how amazingly well angled this turret is, and how hard or pretty much impossible it is to go through this piece of armor. So right here, this is where you are in your element with this tank. This is where you have pretty much all the freedom that you need, pinning the targets one by one and just shooting anything that you want to shoot at. And you can see 4103 damage done in a very rapid succession actually. Once this tank is reloaded and you can hide your hull, you're pretty much, well, invincible if no one is going to flank you. So you can pretty much control a lot of different ridge lines with the gun depression that you have. You can control different alleyways when you can hide your lower plate. There's just so much versatility to this tank. So many tasks that it just does really, really well, and it excels at, and the only weak spot right there is the lower plate. So at tier 9 you already have a mini Kranvagn pretty much. They are almost the same tank, minus the distinctive HP loss that this vehicle has, 300 less HP. Worse gun handling, worse reload time, worse gun elevation, but the same gun depression, the same gun, the same turret armor, and that just makes this tank incredibly powerful. Stupidly powerful. The only tank that was able to do damage to us was OHO, which only fires high explosive rounds most of the time. and he was able to do, I think, about 360 damage. Well, 333 damage to be exact. And that pretty much wraps it up to the Emil II. This is an amazing vehicle. At tier 9, you're going to be facing some very, very well-known and well-liked vehicles. For example, the Conqueror, the Tortoise, the E75, the T10, the STI or ST1. And all of these tanks have very special abilities. But this tank just kind of overtrumps some tanks. For example, the AMX 5120. The AMX 5120 is a bit faster than this vehicle, but it does not have the same armor capabilities, not have the same gun depression. It has the same gun elevation of 8 degrees, which is absolutely nuts. It's so bad. And a little bit of a better gun handling and reload time. But other than that, this vehicle is pretty much very dominant in that respect, in the gun depression area, in the mobility area. The armor aspect is obviously a lot better than the AMX 5120. Mobility wise, it's not as fast as the AMX 5120. It also doesn't have the same track rotation speed, but the factor that this tank is not like 30 kilometers fast, but it's 56 kilometers fast, really make you think, is it still worth going for the French heavy tank line if this tank is just that good, or if this Swedish line is just that good? So we'll see how the other Swedish tanks will fare below the Emil II. We're going to be taking a look at the Emil. Actually, we're first going to be taking a look at the tier 7 to show you guys that there are different Swedish tanks except for the Emil 1, Emil 2 and the Kranvagn, because all three of these tanks are very similar in their kind of playstyle. And we will be doing that next. We'll be taking a look at the tier 7 Swedish, I think, medium tank, because right now, if you're playing from tier 5 to tier 7, you're getting 3 medium tanks, tier 5 one, the tier 6, and the tier 7. And below that are light tanks, I think. And we'll be looking at the entire heavy line, or at least that's what I'm trying right now. It's a lot of work. I do have some time on my watch right now, but obviously I want to do other stuff as well. I have to do other stuff as well too. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.